Welcome everyone to University for the Earth talk series. In this series, we bring some of the most renowned and most powerful voices working with the topic of Earth restoration and creation of regenerative futures for all. And what we hope to have in this series is not only a philosophical conversation about the need for transformation, but more a practical conversation. How can we do it? So we aim to bring people who are actually doing this change at large scale or at medium scale, and who can inspire us to follow their path. And I think that the guest we have today is one of the most amazing inspirators, I think, on our planet. So we will have 1 hour 15 minutes conversation. We'll start with a few questions of our own, but we welcome you to also share your own questions or your thoughts in this chat. Share your links also, so you can inspire other people in the room or maybe provoke other people in the room to think about the topics of this conversation. And we are building up a community that can actually hold this type of conversations, the conversation that lead to action, the conversation that lead to systemic change. So I think Tin already brings a good model, also sharing the work that she does. So I think it will be very interesting if other people can also introduce their work in the chat. And like I said, please, if you are able, keep your cameras on so we'll have sense of the room and feel who is here. And I'll pass to my co-host, Kriton, who will also introduce our guest today.
Hello, everyone. It's very nice to be here with all of you. This is, I'm really looking forward for this discussion. I won't introduce that much John because I think you all of you know John and his work. I will tell you a little bit what John meant to me. So I was in the European Parliament, leading the Parliament on, as a member of the European Parliament, leading the Parliament on forest policy. When I was introduced to the work of John, and for me, as a person devoting my life wherever I was in the nature-based solutions, John's work was proving that nature restoration, ecosystem restoration, is not only possible, but it's already done at a large scale, very silently, in country by country, and we just need to keep on the pace and spread it to more countries. And it was not just saying that; it was articulating in the camera, in documentaries that were spread around the world, like people were watching that. And for me, he practically created the issue of the term, the very idea of nature restoration as part of policy. And I think this is what John does a lot. He finds an idea and then brings it to this world. And these ideas, thankfully, are ideas about how we can protect life. And now he's completing his work by the ecosystem restoration camps and communities, and how he builds communities that are devoted in doing that exactly. So, John, my first question for you is, can we do that? Can we restore the ecosystems? And what do we need to do that? What do we need to do in order to get into this reality where ecosystems on Earth are restored efficiently?
Well, thank you very much for having me. Thank you to everybody for coming out and listening. Um, I guess what I would say about can we do it is no, we can't do it, but nature can recover and we can help nature by removing our impacts and by understanding how the natural ecological systems function. And if we do this, we can align our behavior with evolutionary succession. I think that's what we're required to do. We're not able to, say, like we build a building and we say, well, we're going to build a building, and we can definitely build a building, or we can make a movie, or we can write a song. But actually, the life support systems on the earth have evolved over billions of years. And they evolved long before human beings were even a twinkle in anybody's eye, let's say. And when we understand that, then we see that there are principles that exist in evolutionary succession, and that these are the basis of the creation, constant filtration, and continuous renewal of the Earth's life support systems that we take for granted now, generally. So the oxygenated atmosphere, we're breathing air. What a miracle that is. We're drinking water. We're eating food that's grown in fertile soils. And we live on a massively diverse biological system. And that biological system has also altered the physics in ways which we could not have done. So the temperatures on the planet are regulated. And, we're barely literate in this. The idea that it's carbon disequilibrium in the atmosphere that equals human impact on climate change, that's too much of an abstraction. There's real fundamental actions that we can see that are causing this. So we can restore all degraded lands on the earth if we align our behavior with evolutionary succession. We can't do it by willpower or by abiotic systems. The biotic systems are much more complex than the abiotic ones. So we're very proud of our computers or our phones or our airplanes or our spaceships or whatever it is, but they will all be junk within a very short while. And these systems, which continuously renew, are self-replicating, and which are living systems that are symbiotic, multi-dimensional systems. These are so complex that we have barely begun to understand them. So the better we understand them and the more we understand them, the better. But actually, the real thing that we need to do is honor them, to value them, to realize that these natural systems are more important and more valuable than anything that human beings have ever made and everything that human beings will ever make, because they exist in a type of eternal time. And we as individuals and as generations, we're here for a very short while. So we're just passing through, and we need to understand that and realize that the most important thing that we're here to do is to understand that what we learn, what we grasp about ecosystem function, and what we do is what determines the quality of life in the future. So we can look at all the problems that we're facing and realize that these can be traced back to human activity over the last few thousands and a couple of thousand, tens of thousands, maybe years of human civilization. So those mistakes that were made in the past, we can't go back and make them not happen. But we can understand them and change our behavior and not continue with that type of activity. So that's what we need to do. Sorry, long explanation perhaps.
John, if I may follow up on this, evidently the human systems currently are playing against life, and that's probably a suicidal strategy. So when you say about realigning, where do you think we need to begin? Where are these leverage points?
Well, so I guess probably most of you know a little bit about what I've been doing for the last few decades anyway. I was a journalist and I covered geopolitics and economics and culture, and to some extent terrorism and violence and that kind of thing. But after a while, I began to realize that within this concept of institutionalized or human civilization, you certainly had a lot of different things going on. And in a sense, we're socialized to believe in certain things, to be conditioned to do things. And so when we do that, we're basically just saying, well, what happened before is what it is now, and that's all there's nothing we can do about it. But it looks like we have to look at this and we have to say, well, this is really unacceptable. I mean, the refugee situation, or the people who are hungry or homeless, or the amount of poverty that's institutionalized, and the inequality that we have between the super wealthy and the billions of people who have almost nothing. That strikes me as unacceptable. So those are things that we cannot accept. So we need to change, and we need to look back and look at the results. So now if we're looking at wildfires or droughts or flooding or all of these things which are happening, wars, where do they come from? Because if we look at the majority of people are wonderful. They want to take care of each other, and they're just nice. The children go to school, the old people take care of the family, and the people at working age work very hard everywhere in the world. And so that's pretty much the same. The majority of people are like that. And there's only a tiny minority that really wants to disrupt or wants to hurt other people or take advantage of others. And so we need to come to grips with that. And what we've seen in the ecosystem restoration communities is actually probably we can't throw ourselves in front of the institutional juggernaut, the corporations and the military and the governments and so on, and say, just, we hate you, stop it, and they'll just run over us and we'll be dead. So that's not a very good strategy because it doesn't work, basically. Another strategy would be to build islands of sanity where people are really restoring, making ecological function the central intention of human civilization. If we, from a scientific perspective, logically look at what's happening with climate change, toxicity, biodiversity loss, hydrological dysfunction, etc., we can all see this is terrible. This is leading to some pretty catastrophic outcomes. But we also know a lot about how to restore this. We're just not doing it. And so we have to ask ourselves, why aren't we doing it? And we can look at it and say, institutionally, there are ulterior motives for corporations. There's ulterior motives for governments who want power over others. There's ulterior motives for people who want to have more wealth and gather material possessions to themselves and don't care about all the people on the planet. But if we look around, we hardly ever see them. They're hidden away. They're somewhere, but we don't know who they are. Maybe we even know who they are, but they're in, Mount Olympus somehow. But if we look around and we say, well, hey, if we all took care of each other, we'd be in better shape. And if we all looked around and we said, hey, we all need the same things, why do we all have to privately own tools in the garage or in the workshop? And then how often do you use these tools? And why do we all have cars? We do that because we've created a economic system which is built on the cash flow and sales of mercantile items. So if we didn't do that, we wouldn't need most of those things. We would share them. We could have shared mobility. We could have creator spaces that were used by the entire community. We could have a lot of different changes. And that's what we've been looking at ecosystem restoration camps. So I guess I'll just talk a little bit about that as a strategy. Basically, I think we have to have living laboratories. And we all have to participate in making ecological restoration or ecological function, restoring ecological function on a planetary scale, the central intention of human civilization. And if we do this, we're going to need to have numerous experiments to see really what works. And we know a lot from permaculture. We know a lot from the eco-village network and different eco-villages around the world. And we know a lot from the large-scale ecosystem restoration projects, some of which I've documented and others are doing. We know things from people like Skeeter, who's doing wildcrafting and understands where the edible foods and the herbs and medicinal herbs in the wild are. And all of that is knowledge that we need to have as collective understanding. So I've been calling this lately collaborative inquiry for collective intelligence. Because if we all work together and we study together and we collectively learn, we have a collective consciousness. We have a collective understanding. And that's the way we can have really significant results. So if we want to restore the Earth on a planetary scale, we aren't going to do that alone. There's no possibility any individual, no matter how talented, intelligent, or creative they are, is going to be able to do that. This is a task for humanity as a species. on a planetary scale. So this looks to me like the inflection point, the moment in human history where in Chinese it would be they would call it a Wei Ji situation, which is a crisis. And this means it's dangerous, but it's also an opportunity. And maybe the opportunity only comes because you have it in such a crisis. So this is the moment when we can do this. And if we band together and study together and work together, do we think that we're not going to be able to feed everybody? Or do we think that we're not going to be able to house everybody? The amount of waste that any of us sees, if we're looking for it, is just appalling. Everything is being wasted. If you look at the industrial agriculture situation, probably half of the industrial agriculture is thrown away because it doesn't meet the requirements for being sold in the supermarket, because it has a blemish, or it has a little spot on a tomato, or the carrot is crooked or something like this. Well, this is crazy because it's food, not a commodity. And when did it become a commodity? When did people suddenly decide, all right, if you don't have any money, you should just die, go and starve? You know, that had to be a moment in history, because if you look at all the animals, or if you look at more primitive or more, you know, sort of less developed cultures, they don't do that. They care for everybody. And yeah, of course, it gets harder and harder when people are old and they can't do as much, but they're not thrown out at that point, which I hope not, because I'm 72, so I don't really want to be thrown away on the trash bin of history. That would be a waste. Anyway, you know, these places where people are saying this came about first, in my experience, because I was dreaming about it, and I had this recurrent dream and it wouldn't go away. So every day I woke up and these people were in my mind, skipping around, planting trees or whatever. And I had this dream over and over, and I thought that I was much too, well, my father would say I was like not realistic, you know, get a job, you know, do something normal. But I kept having the dream. So, and I was feeling a bit like, well, this is, you know, I can look around and see that not very many people are going to listen to me. I've been making films about this for a long time. Who's paying attention to what I'm saying? And then, but in order to get the dream to stop, I wrote it down in an essay called Earth Restoration Peace Camps. You can find it on Regeneration International's website if you want to. And it was published in Permaculture magazine. And then after that, thousands and then tens of thousands of people started to say, that's what we want. So when they started saying that, we started thinking about how would we do that? And then the question was, well, do we go beg from the people with high net worth, or from the big NGOs, or from the corporations, or the governments, or who? Or do we just share? We thought about, well, what if we shared? What if everybody shared 10 euros per month, or 120 euros per year? And we thought, well, you know, when 1,000 people said they would share 10 euros per month, or 120 euros per year, we said, okay, we have to start a foundation to take the money. So we did that, and then we built the first camp. And you'll be able to see Andrew Millison, if you don't watch his from Oregon State University, his wonderful videos on permaculture. He's just been in Spain. I was there too. and he did a piece on the first camp showing what they've been able to accomplish. And thousands of people have been through that camp. And besides it being very useful for the individuals who go there and very useful for that landscape, it has encouraged other camps to form. And there are now 80 of these. And they're starting to be called communities. Some, I think, are still camps. Others are really communities. They're much more developed, and they're in 6 continents around the world. So they're pretty much everywhere, and there will be many, many more. And the future ones, we're looking at. Really, everybody started thinking about soil and water and vegetation and biodiversity, and they were also thinking about housing and meals for the people who are working there. But I think lately the discussion has been moving to social issues like housing for young people. A lot of people in Europe and probably in the United States and many other parts of the world are really having trouble imagining that they could buy a house. And also many of them are not necessarily so interested in having a Mac mansion that is just too big and wasteful, really, and it ensures that we all have to have cars and so on. So they would like to be together, and so figuring out how to do smaller dwellings and how to build them ourselves, how to do something in the way the Amish or other communities work and collaborate. Some of that's coming together. We're building creator spaces with woodworking, metalworking, mechanical workshops, industrial sewing, ceramics, design. And interestingly, in the UK, we're starting to involve the van life people. That should be kind of interesting. We're building a workshop to build and repair vans where people can go there, and also places where they can live in the countryside or stay and park their vans in the countryside. So these digital nomads can become part of these communities and be very helpful in both providing some much needed income for those communities, but also having a beautiful place to stay for themselves. And then we can go further and see that there are people who really want to dedicate their lives to doing this. And one of the communities that we have has been doing child care. And doing child care has been really extraordinarily successful for them, because all the parents bring their tiny toddlers to them every day to go to a sort of kindergarten, but it's more or less outside. I think the Europeans would call it forest kindergarten, and sometimes it would be called farming or farm school or something like that. And so it's about how your clothes are. So the kids are wearing snowsuits if it's snowing and rain suits if it's raining, and they have Wellington boots, and they're pretty much outside all the time. And this makes them very strong, and they don't play with plastic or guns or any of that stuff. They play with stones and rocks and animals, and they see snakes and turtles, and they become kind of fearless and stronger. Anyway, and then their parents, this place that has done this is called Drylands Agroecology Research. And it's in Longmont, Colorado. And they have this little sign on the road that says Drylands Agroecology Research. And I'm pretty sure that sign does not attract very many people to go visit them. But every day they have like 20 or 30 families who drive their BMW SUVs and Land Rovers up to drop off their kids. And when they do this, they all go and talk to the kid. I mean, they talk to their kids, tell them what they're doing every day. And they meet the people who are taking care of the kids, who are lovely. And they're just blown away. And then I saw them in one period. They said, well, come visit, because we're going to have this party for the parents and for the people who support the drylands agroecology research. So I go there, and they raised hundreds of thousands of dollars in 2 days from their communities, just by having music. And they had Americans praying and discussing how the mountains and plains used to be. And they had food and wine. A local winery delivered all this wine. And at the end, the people just got out their checkbooks and wrote them checks. And it was hundreds of thousands of dollars. So, this kind of thing. And we've been looking also at the demographic changes. And I'm 72, and I notice probably a few of our people here are not younger or not too young either. And so what about care for the elderly? What about having care for the elderly? And what about having the elderly who are sort of retired or semi-retired really leading? What about having those people saying, we'll take on some managerial roles, or if someone's been an engineer or a scientist or a teacher, and they're not ready to go fishing or play golf all the time or just watch TV from an easy chair, why not help the young people, the next generation, to transition to a place where we all need to be, to ensure that everyone is taken care of, and also to make sure that the water infiltrates and the soil is fertile and the vegetation and the biodiversity all exist. So that's kind of the direction that the ecosystem restoration communities are going. There's also some work in the UK where the van life and the creator space and is also moving toward having wildlife corridors. So some ancient, like the British islands are, really need a lot of attention because they've been occupied for a very long time. And so this particular place has the ruins of Roman forges. It's called Furnace Brook. And there's also a beautiful place called Pines Calyx that they built in Kent, which is a Catalan vault where there's a beautiful natural building which we're using for lectures and we're making a new media production where we're going to have roundtable conversations with diverse people, all talking about restoring the earth and healing the human spirit. So the two seem to go together. Well, that's a long discussion. Does that answer you?
And if I can add to that, to this discussion further, like John, what you describe is how really one size does not fit all. And so you can have these ecosystem restoration communities, and they can be totally focused on different activities, and they can still be part of this ecosystem. My question is, you started by showing to all of us how large-scale restoration can work, like even government-driven sometimes, like the Loess Plateau, or the work in Rwanda that they restored the wetland and they managed to have water for the hydro dams and for the city and electricity for the city, the capital, and so on. And that was large-scale with a lot of government involvement. why do you believe that the path for scaling up goes through the communities, the ecosystem restoration communities, and not the governments?
Well, okay, so I learned about the potential of large-scale ecosystem restoration about 30 years ago. And when I learned this, I basically said, well, I don't really need to cover egotistical politicians who come and go, or these corporations that are, sort of, well, sucking all the resources as profit to themselves, or anything else. But understand this, because this is what's going to determine the quality of life for all life in the future. So when I understood this, I said, oh, okay, I can go all over the world and they'll listen to me now and they'll all want to do large scale ecosystem restoration. And I had a graduate fellowship to a place called Rothamsted Research Institute. It's very important British soil and agriculture institute. And when I went there and lectured and met a lot of the people, the director said, you have to go to Africa. And I said, I have to go to Africa? I said, I've already been to Africa, He said, no, you have to go to Africa. And then this reminded me, my father had always told me, you have to go to China and help China develop. And then now this director is saying, you have to go to Africa. And so I'm okay. So as soon as he said that, the Global Environment Facility, the World Bank, and the British Department for International Development, they all said, here's some money, go to Africa. And so I went to Africa, and I first presented to the Global Environment Facility high-level technical roundtable. And this was to all of the ministers of environment and ministers of finance, mainly from Africa, but all over the world. But not everybody came from all over the world, but most of the Africans were there. And then I also spoke to Terra Africa, which was the restoration organizing thing for all of Africa. And then I went to Rwanda, Tanzania, and Ethiopia. And I was doing something which we called the direct dissemination strategy, which I've heard called the most successful, or the highest impact for the lowest cost development thing that they'd ever seen. So what I did was just, I was me. And so I went and spoke to the president, the prime minister, the cabinet, the parliament, the faculties of the science universities, the students, the press, and we broadcast films on public television. So within a very short time in those countries, everybody was talking about, oh, you can restore large-scale ecosystem restorations. And especially in Rwanda and in Ethiopia, it really transformed. They rewrote their land use policy laws, for instance. And then there were very large-scale multilateral programs to do large-scale restoration. And they were quite successful. There's over 15 years of data on that now. But what was interesting was I thought, oh, and so now I'm going to be sent everywhere. But no, I wasn't. And so I became a little bit frustrated with this, that what's wrong with those? I think at some point in that time I met and went to the EU because Kriton asked me to do it. And so I went there, but the politicians, I think the level of complexity and the difficulty and that generally speaking, depending on where it is, it's not always the same, but really these people turn over quickly. I think it was like when I was working for television and the foreign editor I always had a new foreign editor. It was like they couldn't stay longer than a year or two, that the job was too stressful and they would be replaced. And, as long as they were gone. And that's the way it is with the politicians. I've covered Gorbachev and Brezhnev and Deng Xiaoping and Clinton and Carter and Reagan and, everybody. And nobody asked me about that. Nobody wants to know, apparently. But I think what I've learned about ecological restoration is very important. And the reason that the ecosystem restoration camps or smaller scale restoration came up is, if it's not going to be led by the governments and the corporations, then who's going to do it? And if we don't do it, I think we have predictable catastrophic outcomes. So I think these predictable catastrophic outcomes are we can't handle them. We can't handle the level of wildfires and hurricanes and floods and things that we're experiencing now. And if you think this is something, then if you go back and look at the data, you realize that the frequency and the amplitude of these events is increasing very rapidly. So when you understand that, then you go, well, if you stay on this path, then the frequency and amplitude of these particular types of activities are going to massively increase. We can't take it. This is an existential threat to human civilization. And it's not like it's an existential threat to life, but it's an existential threat to humanity. And so we are humanity, so let's not go there. Let's not do that. So if it's not going to be the institutions that we have, what's it going to be? And I think I kind of lean toward Buckminster Fuller. Like if we throw ourselves against the things that are in power but are not really working, and we criticize them or we protest or whatever, it's really not going to do very much. But if we build islands of sanity and there we experiment with all these things, then very soon the value of this is going to be recognized. Because if you drive through a desert and you come across a place which is green and lush and it has water and people are happy and everyone is gainfully employed and everybody is healthy and it's beautiful, then you're going to go, I wonder what's going on there. Like, why is it like that when it's a desert all around? And then you find out, well, it's a choice. We have to make that our central intention. If that's our central intention, we can do it. If that's not our central intention and we decide we're just going to play golf or go fishing or work 80 hours a day to buy plastic goo pods that have come across the ocean and container ships. I mean, it's purposeless. We need to have meaning in our lives, and the meaning in my life comes from working to ensure the future can survive, that Earth systems can be supported to restore themselves. So, does that make sense? Was I successful?
I think that certainly makes sense. John, and I think there'll be lots of questions from people in this room, but let me ask one more question that really intrigues me in this conversation. The notion of Earth restoration peace camps, the intersection between peace and restoration work and regenerative futures that we're exploring. So on one hand, when I'm thinking about spaces that you describe, such as the one that is this beautiful, lush space in the center of desert, I cannot help but think how fragile it is, how fragile it could be if attacked, for example, by rogue terrorist groups that are quite frequent in those areas. Like, for example, ISIS has been destroying many of such spaces, but they are not the only ones. So the fragility that is frequently disrupted by human intervention. And one of examples is from my friend Joshua Kankanka, who created one of the largest eco-villages in Cameroon and worked for 30 years to build it up and attract a lot of young people. And then over just a few days, it was destroyed by an invasion of soldiers, kind of on their path to restore some, let's say, order, as they thought, destroyed their village because they saw it as a risk to, let's say, some level of security, of having that community of independent people. So on one hand, how do you see the connection between peace and restoration work? Are they interdependent? Do we need to work on one as precondition for the other? Do we need to work on them in parallel? And how do we, if we build up these grassroots movements, cope with the oppressive and violent nature of nation states, of these hostile groups that frequently just try to grab the resources? So what's your answer to this?
Well, I'm not sure I have an answer to that. I would say we have to live our lives. So we're on a path of life. And so we decide what our path of life is going to be. And I think I believe in karma. So, you know, the more you are supportive or the more you are kind, the more you are engaged in doing what needs to be done, the better I think it is. And for those, say, violent groups on the edges, you know, I don't have a solution for them. I think they're going to have to, if they live by the sword, they're probably going to die by the sword. And so maybe they should think about that. And I know I just spent 2 weeks in Saudi Arabia. And so, you know, everybody's the same, really, in some ways. And I think that I was also in Azerbaijan, which reminded me of being in Moscow back in the 80s. And it was hilarious in a way. You know, I was at a synagogue in the mountains outside of Baku. And there was a story where there was an attack on the Jewish community by Turkoman fighters, and the head guy, merciless killer guy, had rushed into the town with his horde of fighters And they came to the synagogue and they burst into the synagogue. And the rabbi took the holy book and held it up. And suddenly, this guy struck with his sword and hit the book. And when he hit the book, he cut it deeply, but it didn't go through. And he was so appalled by and terrified by the fact that he had hit this sacred text, ancient sacred text, that he fell on the ground and asked for forgiveness. And the rabbi said, if you repent of your murderous ways, you will certainly be forgiven, And the guy got up. I don't think it changed him completely, but it really shocked him to his core. And he wrote a thing out and he stuck it on the synagogue and said, no one, no Muslim should ever touch this synagogue. And it's a beautiful synagogue, till today. There's a whole museum about it, and they're very interested. But I mean, of course, there were other pogroms and tragedies all along. And I would say that that's not the first time I've heard that kind of story. The same story was sort of told to me in what's called St. Catherine's monastery on Mount, well, you could call it Mount Catherine, but that's clearly a sort of crusade name. So Mount Sinai, where there are quite a lot of things happen on Mount Sinai. And in that same place, there was this monk in the monastery at St. Catherine's. They had this monk in a great outfit and great beard. Even Skeeter can't match it. It was really a big, great beard, And I had serious beard envy when I went there. But then when we got to talking of it, I've heard that accent before. Where are you from? And he said Kentucky. He was from Kentucky, and he was there in the Sinai. And in that monastery, it was just like 3 meters away from a mosque. And they had an arch connecting the two, and you walked under the arch. And on one side was the mosque, and on this side was the monastery. And they had a letter from Mohammed in there saying, never touch this. No Muslim, this is sacred ground. Never touch this. And even though Alexandria had its library trashed in Mount Catherine's, it was never touched. They have the ancient texts. It's quite amazing. So I don't know. I think I want to, about this idea of peace, I think it's beyond me to deal with that. I think I defer to higher powers on in those issues.
And I think now it's time to open up for questions. Like, we have another 15 minutes. So whoever would like to pose a question to John, please raise your hand either through the app or physically. I cannot see someone right now. So if you're raising the hand, I cannot see you. If you do want
We
to
can
ask
see
a
that
question, just open
Ellen
the microphone.
raises her hand physically, I think.
Hi. My question for John would be, what areas of the globe right now, in your view, are those areas where there should be a greater focus for the sake of the biotic pump?
Well, I think we have to restore all degraded lands on the earth. And I'm not really sure that we know enough to determine exactly where, but I know that there's been some, I was looking and we have some camp communities in Baja in Mexico, and they're doing really well. And I think that you can see from the NASA images that if they bring back they capture the evaporation coming off the Pacific Ocean, that it will have enormous impacts. I think that's one place. But I mean, we're working on some radical things in the Middle East, and they have so much money, but they're so focused on materialism, it's ridiculous. So in a sense, I think almost may be futile, because they kind of look at everything like it needs to go up quickly, and it's just something fast. I think they need to think about the 7,000 years it took to transform that area from the breadbasket it was. So I think we have to do everywhere, and if we do everywhere, then you have camps and communities everywhere, and then as that grows, it changes the economy, because fundamentally ecological function is more valuable than anything that human beings have ever made, and everything that human beings will ever make. And if we don't understand that, so we have this economy which is based on mercantilism, buying and selling things. And so by inflating, is everybody frozen? Can you hear me? Am I still there?
Yes,
Yeah,
you're
we're
there.
still here. I think your video is a little bit frozen, but we can hear you well.
Okay. So
now we lost you, John. Yeah,
Okay.
John is going to reconnect soon.
John is back, I think.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the economy needs to change. And when we understand that the value of ecological function is higher than anything else, then that makes our economy reflect that. And when it does, it's easy for us to do the work that needs to be done. But I see two more hands.
Yeah, I think Mike was first, and then Kostas will follow.
Yes, thank you, John. This is really interesting. In your work with communities that have put themselves out there to restore the local ecosystems, what have you found has been the importance of those people also improving their livelihoods as they restore the ecological systems? Is this an incentive for them, or is it something outside of what they're trying to do to improve their livelihoods?
Well, I think it is an incentive. I think that a lot of people are thinking that way. But actually, I think that really the way we should be thinking about it is value creation, not about like GDP cash flow economy thing. Because the reality is, if you start transforming and the ecological systems, and we restore them, we restore the soils, we can really grow soils, grow organic soils rapidly if we try hard. And so we should do that. And we should restore the full vegetative cover, and we should protect the biodiversity and increase it. And we also need to learn about the value of ancient DNA, the DNA that has not been hybridized or genetically modified or heavily bred for specific things, because that's the thing that we know created, constantly filtered, and continuously renewed the oxygenated atmosphere, the freshwater system, the fertile soils, and the biodiversity. So we need to do that. But I think that we need to change the economy. We need to not to monetize the ecology. We need to naturalize the economy. So we need to tell the truth that the ecological function is more valuable than stuff. And we have to stop believing in stuff as the basis of buying and selling things. And we also have to realize that he who dies with the most stuff doesn't win. There's nothing to win. So, I think this is how I feel about it. But yes, we have to think about this, and by taking on the social responsibility, care for the elderly, care for children, food security for everyone, and making food a right, not a commodity. This is real wealth. Real wealth is not buying and selling more food. But real wealth is having a community where everybody eats and everybody is equal and everybody is kind. So I think we have a few more questions. I hope that helps.
Yeah.
Kostas.
Hello, thank you for this opportunity, Kriton and Dr. Liu and everyone else. I first heard about your work on restoration from an acquaintance who's in one of the projects in Spain, Yannick, the Dutch lady, and it was very impressive to me what can be done, and seeing also the evolution of that. And I wonder a bit about the operational side of these projects, also trying to think how this could be done in a country like mine, Greece, where there may be some lands at some point available, in theory at least, for restoration projects, like land that used to be on old quarries and mines, and otherwise degraded land. So what would you say? Maybe this is not the right question, but what would you say is a minimum size of the project so that ecosystem services are restored according to some specificities you can mention, and how costly is it, and what is the time horizon to say that you can make a full circle from a very degraded landscape to a healthy restored landscape, let's say in the Mediterranean area context?
Well, this is something that would take potentially a little longer to do than we have today to answer that really comprehensively. But I would say the best case is that you need to come together as a community, that you do not want to try this as an individual, and you don't want to necessarily try this as a business. There are aspects where you are creating huge value, but in the sense of the GDP or the business cash flow type business, not necessarily. And so you need to realize that it's the long game, and you want to do this for your family and for your health and for the future generations of life. And that when society recognizes how much value has been created, then suddenly they're going to realize this is the right thing. The other thing I would mention, I never talk about ecosystem services. I think that's an anthropocentric point of view. And I believe that there's only functional or dysfunctional ecosystems. And so if we think that the ecosystems are there for us to serve us, we're really wrong. They're not here to serve us. They're part of a functional, multi-dimensional symbiotic system. And we're just the beneficiaries, but it's not set up for us. It's all life, and it was created before we existed, and we evolved in it. We co-evolved in it, and I think we are bringing consciousness to this system. We're just not very good at it. So we have the ability now to bring consciousness to this, to understand how these systems function and what life is, the meaning of life, go there. But if we don't understand the meaning of life and we believe that things are more valuable than life itself, then we've missed the point. And the one other thing is, I'm not a doctor, so please don't call me doctor. I've had a couple of professorships as visiting professors in places, but I never did a PhD, so I don't really want to go around being called doctor. And there are two other questions I see now still.
Yeah, and we have about 5 minutes remaining, so let's try to address both of them quick. Art, please go ahead. Unmute yourself and ask a question.
Hey, good morning. Thank you, John. Finally got the pleasure to meeting you. I vibe 100% on the lots of wavelengths that you have instructed us or guide us in such a wise webinar. Thank you so much, because there's a lot of people here who attended that basically are sync with nature. I work for Ecotropics, a nonprofit organization that is established in Washington, D.C. We are helping Colombians and especially growers that has plenty of accrued debt by the banking industry. They want to take their land. So the only way that we were able to come up with an ecological economic solution was to get in this carbon market. I know there's a lot of critiques, and probably you are not much in tune with this approach, but unfortunately is what we can do the best today to naturalize the economics. And we were very bottom up, like we were selected by a very large group of growers, and we are building connectivity of corridors between two national parks that belongs to the government. And we work with private parcel owners, and we are developing a Red Plus project, but also we are doing restoration ecosystems based off a modeling of the biodiversity data. As you know, Colombia is a global biodiversity hotspot. And my question are twofold. The first one is, I would love to have more of your guidance. So I am the X generation. I want to get lots of lessons learned from your journey. And I would love to see train the leaders that we are kind of like working very hard with communities to make sure that lots of your principles get unfolded, and it's very important, right, to learn more and to learn from you. So it's very important to have a school of leaderships that are sync on these principles. And the second thing, it's you mentioned that the economics needs to get naturalized or something like that. Probably I didn't catch very well the message, but are the tools that we have today, right? And probably the stewardships, the environmental stewardships, is not there. They needs money to get rid of the bloody banking system, to pay for their lands, to recover their lands. It's kind of our first goal with this project. But at the same time, we have over 6,000 hectares to restore nature, and we already got a grant. We are protecting the highest forest in the tropical Andes, and it's called Polylepis. And Polylepis is a species that you can find since Argentina to Venezuela. And we are replanting lots of these forests to make sure that water, since this type of forest is perfect capturing water in a mist, and all the biology of the Polylepis is basically optimized to be an ecosystem service. I know it's another word that doesn't sound very much here, but at some point, ecosystems provide provisions, regulations, support, and they love to see ecosystems as infrastructure, because for these type of communities, when we compare an ecosystem like a road, like a bridge, like a school that provides a lot of services, right, for the community, they've been able to sync on this message to prevail. So my question is that bad to keep thinking in this until the collective awareness is ready to say, yes, we do this for stewardship, we do this for the sake of nature? And that's probably one of my two questions, John. Thank you.
I think that you can be in touch with me at any time. I'm sure that Pavel can give you my contact information, and that's true for everyone. And also, I think that, for us, sorry, all the camps and communities that we have are autonomous, self-organizing, and self-governing. So it's not a question of what is right or wrong. It's a question of having living laboratories that are finding the answers. And they may be culturally specific in some places, and they may have principles that go across all places. So I would say, for instance, there in evolutionary succession, there's always more biomass, always more necromass, and always more biodiversity. And that is something that we have reversed. So you can see that specifically. And if you reduce the biomass, reduce the necromass, and reduce the biodiversity, you get deserts. So you disrupt the hydrology, you disrupt the fertility, you disrupt everything. So I would say do what you've got to do and work to have collaborative inquiry for collective intelligence, so that everybody locally, and then enlarge the field and have more and more people talking about it. So that's my best advice. And we can have another talk offline if you want to, get my contact from Pavel. Skeeter, you have a question? I'm fine for time. It's I'm here, so you don't have to stop.
I think we'll have to wrap up in the next 5 to 10 minutes, but let's go with the
Okay.
last question from Michael, please.
Hello, John. So in your talk today, I got inspired. I figured out a place I can do a restoration camp. So thank you. But my question is, I'm inviting everybody here to the Global Earth Repair Conference, Convergence. We're doing in May, and you're going to be there, and we'll have an online part. But the question is, what are the other events out there? Is there anything else like the Global Earth Repair Conference, Convergence, You may have come across things I don't know. So just, is there any, what are other one or two top events out there?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure. We're working on something which we're calling the flourishing path. And what we're looking at is to have a number of things happen. So maybe we can also work with you on that when we're in Port Townsend. That would be lovely. But we're doing that all around the world. We're having round tables where we're doing collaborative inquiry for collective intelligence, where the ideal for us is that this is the philosophical and intellectual discussion. Uh-oh, I'm hearing myself coming back to me. But anyway, this is the round table is this conversation, and there's also a live audience, and there's also a streaming audience for that, but that's just the production part of it, because in a television production or later on through editing, we will excerpt the discussion and have smaller bits. We'll also have food and talk about where the food comes from, whether the food is a commodity or the food is a right, or whether it's organic or industrial, or what kind of chemicals or what kind of toxicity might be in other types of things, and what's the cultural things, and what about wild food. So all of that will be discussed, and it'll also there'll be a menu and a dinner. So all of the people in the round table and all of the audience in the round table will eat the food, and we'll film it all. And then there'll also be music. I'm especially interested in, if anybody knows Jacob Collier, I would really like to have Jacob Collier do his audience choir thing. So we're trying to reach out to him and others. There are some others who are really Mishka and Xavier Rudd, people like that, who actually do a lot of music around this. But I don't know any specifically other things. I just put in a plug for you though. The Earth Repair Summit. Is it the third one now? You're muted.
This will be the third one.
Yeah. So it's wonderful. I loved the first one especially, where really a lot of Native Americans came, and I learned a lot at that and had a very good time. So I think we can have this kind of thing around the world as well. And I think it's really, for all of us, it's about mass collaboration and mass participation, because there's no competition about restoring the earth. We need to work together to do it. And so this is about collaboration everywhere. So I guess, Pavel, what do you think? Are we in good shape?
I think we are in good shape. And I really like that the last question is about conventions. And there is already one more convention mentioned in the chat, the International Food Forest Garden Symposium in the Netherlands. As University for the Earth, we will also hold our Global Earth Regenerator Summit this year. We decided to move it to the second half of the year to build up more momentum. But it will, I think, align with other events nicely, and I will be glad to in touch with other organizers to coordinate on because our focus is on the economic component. How do we create economic conditions? So some of the questions that were ask today, how do we make sure that human communities rebuild their economy to realign with planetary processes, is perhaps what we also need to discuss as soon as possible. So thank you very much today for this beautiful and very inspirational and thought-provoking conversation. Thank you, John, for being with us today. You're always creating challenge for people, and you're always bringing this conversation to really uplifted to a different level of thinking and action. So thank you very much for being yourself in the world.
Okay.
Kriton, would you like to say some words before we close?
Yeah, one moment. I'm going to try to see whether I can do this. And I'll just tell you that if you're interested to find some of my writings or broadcast works, I'm going to put this up. And you'll be able to find it. Where am I, though? I'm going here, I think. Or there. Where am I?
And we'll make sure to distribute them after this meeting, John. So you can send them to me.
I'm just putting it in the chat. So here's a place you can go to in the chat. This is my academia page. So if you go there, you'll have a lot of films and published work. And I think you can also find my contact information there if you have any trouble, but you can also ask Pavel.
So thank you, John, very, very much. If I can add a word, like John has shown to us how the large-scale restoration works. Now he's showing us how to build communities of restoration. My take will be for everyone to follow its calling and to follow where he sees it, feels it can bring about ecosystem restoration, and just go and do it. And so let's have all these thoughts, this beautiful vision set by John in our minds as this year ends, and a new will begin. And always at the beginning of a new year, it's the beginning of many beautiful ideas for endeavors and projects. So let's start. Let's start in 2025 with ecosystem restoration. Any way you can, but let's do it.
Bravo. Thank you, everyone, and seasonal greetings and Happy New Year.